The morning sun warmed Park Sunja's back as she worked in her garden. At 68 years old, she moved slowly but surely among her vegetables and flowers. Her small house in New Seoul had the best garden in the neighborhood, and everyone knew it. The sweet smell of ripening tomatoes filled the air, mixing with the scent of fresh soil. Her grandson, Han Jae-ho, played nearby with his toy spaceships. The 7-year-old boy made whooshing sounds as he ran around the garden, careful not to step on his grandmother's plants. He knew better than to disturb her precious vegetables. "Grandmother, look, I'm fighting the space monsters," Jae-ho called out, waving his plastic spaceship in the air. Sunja smiled as she pulled a weed from around her prized cabbage. "Be careful, little one. Don't get too close to the pepper plants." She sat back on her gardening stool, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. Unknown to them both, high above Earth's atmosphere, real aliens watched their every move. The Nexus Dominion scout ship hung invisible in the sky, its advanced sensors focused on the elderly woman and her grandson. "Commander, we have completed our initial scan of the human settlement," reported Officer Kex. The alien's gray skin reflected the soft blue light of the ship's control room. "Our data suggests the older humans are the weakest of their species. They move slowly, require frequent rest, and spend much time in recreational activities." Commander Vex studied the holographic display showing Sunja teaching Jae-ho how to check if the tomatoes were ripe. "Excellent. These elderly humans will make perfect first targets for our invasion. They can't run, they can't fight, and they'll be easy to control." How wrong they were. Back in her garden, Sunja felt something odd. After 68 years of life, she had learned to trust her instincts. Something wasn't right about the sky today. She looked up, squinting at the clear blue expanse above her house. "Jae-ho, come here," she called softly. The boy ran over, still clutching his toy spaceship. "It's time to go inside and help grandmother make lunch." "But I want to play more," Jae-ho protested. Sunja stood up slowly, her knees creaking. "If you help me, I'll teach you how to make proper kimchi. It's time you learned the family recipe." She smiled, but her eyes kept scanning the sky. Inside her house, Sunja moved with purpose. She went to her kitchen and opened a drawer that looked like it held only cooking utensils. Hidden beneath the spatulas and spoons lay a small device, its red light blinking steadily. She pressed a button, and the light turned green. Across New Seoul, other grandmothers and grandfathers received her signal. In their homes, gardens, and park benches, elderly men and women noted the warning without any obvious reaction. They had been waiting for this day. In space, Commander Vex watched with satisfaction. "Begin preparations for Phase 1 of the invasion. Target all Earth sectors with high concentrations of elderly humans. They will be our easiest conquest." Officer Kex nodded, inputting commands into the ship's computer. Neither alien noticed that their long-range scanners had started to show strange readings. Something was interfering with their equipment, but surely these primitive humans couldn't be responsible. After all, they were only watching a harmless old woman teaching her grandson how to make kimchi. The quiet before the storm was about to end, and the aliens of the Nexus Dominion were about to learn a very important lesson about underestimating human grandparents. The Silver Peaks retirement village looked peaceful in the early morning light. Kim Yum-ho, a 72-year-old former military instructor, sat in the common room teaching other residents his special version of Tai Chi. His wife, Lee Mi-rae, watched from her seat by the window while knitting what looked like a simple scarf. "Remember," Young-ho said to his class of 12 elderly students, "movement is like water, smooth, flowing, but powerful." His students, all over 65, followed his gentle motions with surprising grace. The first sign of trouble came when the lights flickered. Mi-rae's knitting needle stopped moving, and her eyes narrowed. She had not survived 70 years by ignoring such signs. "Young-ho," she called softly, "I think it's time for that special exercise we practiced." Her husband nodded once. He turned to his class and said, "Today, we will practice the Dragon Rises formation." Everyone in the room straightened their backs. They knew this was not about exercise anymore. Outside, 3 large alien ships appeared in the sky, their stealth systems deactivating. They were dark gray, shaped like giant arrowheads, and each one was bigger than the retirement home itself. Commander Vex's voice boomed from the ships. "Elderly humans, you have been chosen as the first group for peaceful relocation. Please do not resist. This is for your own safety." Inside the retirement home, Yumho smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Mireille put down her knitting, revealing not a scarf, but a complex rope net made of reinforced steel thread. Other residents pulled similar items from their bags and pockets. Garden tools modified into weapons, walking sticks that concealed sharp blades, and even a set of dentures that could intercept alien communications. The aliens sent down their transport beams, expecting to easily collect their first batch of weak, elderly humans. Instead, they found themselves facing a group of senior citizens who moved with unexpected speed and purpose. Young Ho led the first defense, his Tai Chi movements flowing into combat techniques he had perfected over 50 years. Mireille coordinated the others, her knitted nets trapping alien soldiers with embarrassing ease. "How are they doing this?" Officer Keck screamed into his communicator. They were supposed to be harmless. An alien soldier tried to grab Mrs. Ock from Building C, only to find himself flipped over her shoulder. She had been teaching judo for 40 years before retiring, and she hadn't forgotten a single move. In the garden, Mr. Park from room 205 used his modified gardening tools with deadly accuracy. "You youngsters," he told a trapped alien soldier, "never learn to respect your elders." Commander Vex watched in horror as his first wave of troops was thoroughly defeated by what he had thought would be the easiest targets on Earth. His sensors showed more elderly humans gathering at other retirement homes across the city, all moving with the same purposeful efficiency. "Retreat," he ordered. "Retreat immediately." As the alien ships pulled back, Young Ho gathered his fellow residents. "Good work, everyone. Now let's contact the other retirement communities. I believe Park Sunja's group will need our help next." Mireille picked up her special knitting needles again. "I'll send the signal." "And Yumho." She smiled at her husband. "I think we should prepare the special kimchi for our unexpected guests. The very spicy one." The aliens had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that age meant weakness, forgetting that those who live long lives do so for very good reasons. Park Sunja sat at her kitchen table, her old flip phone open in front of her. To anyone watching, she looked like a typical grandmother sending text messages to her friends. In reality, she was coordinating the largest resistance network the aliens had ever faced. "The kimchi is fermenting well," she typed, which meant the defense plans were ready. "Come for tea tomorrow," she added, code for mobilizing their forces. 20 years of running her restaurant chain had taught her how to manage people and resources. Now those skills were being put to a very different use. In his basement workshop, retired engineer Choi Dae-sung worked on something special. His wrinkled hands moved carefully over the parts of a dismantled microwave oven. Around him sat 30 more microwaves, all modified in the same way. "Grandmother Park," he spoke into his old-style phone. "The kitchen appliances are ready for the neighborhood cooking festival." He smiled as he adjusted one final wire. The aliens didn't understand why their ship's communications suddenly filled with static every time they flew over certain neighborhoods. They never suspected it had anything to do with the growing number of broken microwave ovens in the local recycling center. At her favorite coffee shop, Sunja met with her neighborhood watch group. 10 grandmothers sat around a large table, sharing what looked like photos of their grandchildren. Instead, they were passing around surveillance photos of alien patrol routes. "My grandson took these lovely pictures," said Mrs. Ba, pointing to an image that clearly showed the aliens' weak spots in their armor. "Such a talented boy." Commander Vex was getting frustrated. His ships kept losing contact with each other, and his soldiers reported strange interference with their equipment. Even worse, every time they tried to capture a group of elderly humans, they found empty rooms and cold teacups. "How are they always one step ahead?" he demanded, slamming his hand on his control panel. Officer Kex checked the scans again. "Sir, we're detecting unusual energy patterns across the city. They seem to be coming from residential areas." In her garden, Sunja tended to her plants while listening to radio reports from her network. The modified hearing aid in her ear picked up secure frequencies that the aliens couldn't detect. She had stations all over the city now, run by grandparents who looked like they were just enjoying their retirement. "The vegetables need more water," came a voice through her hearing aid, warning of alien ships approaching the east side of the city. "The birds are singing loudly today," said another, signaling that Choi Da-sung's modified microwaves were ready for action. Sunja looked up at the sky and smiled. The aliens still hadn't learned that years of managing family gatherings, remembering everyone's birthdays, and keeping track of dozens of grandchildren's schedules had made grandmothers the best intelligence operators on Earth. She pressed a button on her gardening tools, and across the city, hundreds of modified microwave ovens turned on at once. Above them, alien ships suddenly lost all communication with their base. The invasion was about to face its biggest challenge yet. A network of grandmothers armed with decades of experience and a lifetime of organizing skills. The alien forward base stood tall and gray against the morning sky. Commander Vex had chosen an abandoned warehouse district for their ground operations, thinking it was far from any elderly humans. He was wrong. In her kitchen just 3 blocks away, former chemistry teacher Kang Hisu studied the bubbling jars on her counter. At 75, her hands were steady as she measured ingredients with perfect precision. Around her, 5 other grandmothers worked at their own stations, each tending to different fermentation projects. "The kimchi needs 3 more days," Hisu said, but she wasn't talking about food. The special mixture in her jars contained carefully fermented cabbage, combined with compounds that could disable alien technology on contact. "The aliens won't wait 3 days," said Mrs. Kim, stirring her own batch. "They're getting more aggressive." Hisu smiled. "Then we'll have to work faster. 40 years of teaching chemistry taught me a few shortcuts." At the alien base, Officer Kex noticed something strange. Their equipment was beginning to malfunction, but only in small ways at first. Doors wouldn't close properly. Computers took longer to start. The air smelled like fermented vegetables. "Commander," Kex reported, "our sensors are detecting unusual bacterial activity in the area. It seems to be coming from human food storage units." Commander Vex laughed. "Are you suggesting we're being attacked by pickled vegetables?" In her makeshift laboratory, Hisu added the final ingredients to her mixture. The recipe looked simple: cabbage, salt, red pepper, and other traditional ingredients. But hidden within the fermentation process was a scientific breakthrough. The bacteria that made kimchi tangy had been carefully modified to produce compounds that interfered with alien technology. "Ready for delivery," she announced. Her team of grandmothers packed their special kimchi into ordinary containers. They looked just like regular elderly women sharing food with their neighbors. The aliens never stopped the grandmothers who walked past their base. Why would they? They were just carrying food containers, talking about recipes and grandchildren. That night, everything at the alien base started to fail at once. Their advanced weapons wouldn't fire. Their communication systems only played old Korean folk songs. Every piece of alien technology that had been exposed to the fermented mixture began to shut down. "Impossible," Commander Vex shouted as his command center went dark. "How are they doing this?" In her kitchen, Hisu prepared another batch while listening to the chaos through her special radio. Her grandson had always laughed when she said kimchi could solve any problem. Now she was proving just how right she had been. "Next batch needs more pepper," she said to her team. "And perhaps a touch more of the special ingredient. Those aliens need to learn that Earth grandmothers have centuries of combined knowledge in fermenting, preserving, and protecting our families. The Resistance had found its secret weapon, hidden in the most ordinary place. The traditional recipes passed down through generations of Korean grandmothers. Every morning at 6 o'clock, retired martial arts instructor Yoon Ta-won led what appeared to be a simple exercise group in the local park. Today, 20 elderly men moved through their forms with careful precision. To any observer, including the alien surveillance drones flying high above, it looked like nothing more than senior citizens doing their morning routine. The aliens were about to learn how wrong they were. "Remember," Ta-won said quietly as he moved through a basic form, "when the time comes, use their weight against them. Aliens are tall, but they have poor balance." His students nodded, their movements disguising years of combat experience. In the middle of their exercise, a young woman ran into the park. "Grandfather," she called out, fear in her voice. "They're coming. 3 alien patrol units are heading this way." Ta-won didn't even break his rhythm. "Ah, good. Today we will have a special lesson." He smiled at his students. "Formation 3, everyone. Just like we practiced." The group of grandfathers moved into what looked like a traditional dance formation. As the alien patrol units approached, their heavy boots making the ground shake, not one elderly man showed any sign of fear. The alien sergeant stepped forward. "This area is now under Nexus Dominion control. All humans must evacuate immediately." Of course," Ta-won said pleasantly. "We are just finishing our morning exercise. Would you like to join us? It's very good for balance." The aliens laughed. Their sergeant moved to grab Ta-won's arm. What happened next was so fast that the alien surveillance cameras couldn't properly record it. Ta-won's gentle exercise movement transformed into a precise throw. The alien sergeant, despite his advanced armor, found himself flying through the air. All around the park, the other grandfathers sprang into action. Their slow, careful movements became lightning-fast martial arts techniques. Each man had decades of experience in different fighting styles, and they had been practicing together every morning for months. "Impossible," one alien soldier shouted as he was effortlessly flipped by Mr. Ba, an 80-year-old former wrestling champion. Ta-won moved through the chaos like a dance instructor, calling out corrections. "Remember your posture, Mr. Kim. Pivot from the hip, Mr. Lee. Just like we practiced." The alien patrol never stood a chance. Their advanced weapons and armor meant nothing against 70 years of martial arts experience. Within minutes, they retreated in complete disorder. As the aliens fled, Ta-won gathered his students. "Good work, everyone. Tomorrow we'll practice throws again. And remember," he smiled at his fellow grandfathers, "age is not a weakness. It is a weapon forged by time." Back at their base, Commander Vex watched the surveillance footage in disbelief. How can this be happening? They were just doing exercises. Officer Kex, nursing several bruises, replied quietly, "Sir, I don't think those were just exercises." The morning sun rose higher as Ta-won's group returned to their gentle movements. To anyone watching, they were once again just elderly men doing their daily routine. But now they had sent a clear message. Underestimate Earth's grandparents at your own risk. Han Jae-ho sat in his grandmother's kitchen, watching Park Sun-ja pull her old recipe book from the highest shelf. The leather-bound book looked ordinary, its pages yellow with age and stained from years of cooking. But today, Jae-ho would learn its true purpose. "Grandmother, why are we looking at recipes now?" Jae-ho asked. "The aliens are just 3 streets away." Sun-ja placed the book carefully on the table. "Every family has its secrets, Jae-ho. Our recipe book holds more than just ways to cook good food." She opened the book to a page marked, "Special Kimchi Recipe." Jae-ho leaned forward, his eyes widening as his grandmother pointed to strange markings between the recipe lines. What looked like cooking notes were actually coded messages about alien weaknesses. "Your great-grandmother started this book. Sunja explained, turning the pages slowly. She learned about the aliens from her own grandmother. Every generation of our family has added to it, preparing for this day. The recipe for traditional soup contained detailed maps of alien patrol routes. The secret ingredient list showed weak points in alien armor. Even the cooking temperatures were code for the exact frequencies that disrupted alien communications. But how did they know? Jaho whispered, touching the old pages gently. Sunja smiled. The aliens have tried to invade Earth before. Each time, they underestimated us. Each time, we drove them away. And each time, we added more knowledge to our family books. She turned to a section about preserving vegetables. Hidden in the instructions was a complete guide to disabling alien technology using common household items. All across the city, Sunja said, other grandparents are sharing their own family secrets. Every recipe book, every photo album, every silly old story, they all contain pieces of the knowledge we need. Suddenly, the sound of alien vehicles rumbled outside. Jiho looked worried, but Sunja remained calm. "Quick," she said, "help me prepare this special recipe." She pointed to instructions that seemed to be about making kimchi, but were actually directions for creating an electromagnetic pulse device. As they worked together, Sunja taught Jiho how to read the hidden messages. Each measurement, each timing, each temperature had a secret meaning. Generations of grandparents had disguised their resistance plans as simple family recipes. "Remember, Jiho," Sunja said as they finished their preparation, "our strength isn't just in what we know. It's in how we pass it down through the generations. The aliens think we are just old people with old books. They don't understand that these books contain centuries of wisdom and resistance." The alien patrol passed their house, never suspecting that the elderly woman and her grandson working in the kitchen were actually preparing another defeat for the Nexus Dominion. The recipe book sat open on the table, its pages full of secrets waiting to be used. The Nexus Dominion had finally had enough. After weeks of embarrassing defeats by Earth's elderly population, Commander Vex called in their ultimate warrior. The Supreme Combat Specialist arrived in a gleaming black ship, his armor covered in medals from 100 conquered worlds. "This ends today," the Supreme Combat Specialist announced to his troops. "I will personally capture their leader, this grandmother they call Oknam's son." At 82 years old, Oknam's son lived in a small apartment filled with family photos. She had raised 5 children through difficult times, managed a household during economic hardship, and kept peace between 3 generations of strong-willed family members. Now she sat quietly, drinking tea and waiting. The alien warrior burst through her door, weapons ready. "Surrender immediately," he commanded. Nam's son looked up from her teacup. "You didn't take off your shoes," she said quietly. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had spent decades making children feel guilty about their mistakes. The Supreme Combat Specialist hesitated. Something in her tone made him feel strangely ashamed. "Sit down," Nam's son said, pointing to the chair across from her. "We need to talk about your behavior." To his own surprise, the alien warrior sat. His advanced combat training hadn't prepared him for the disappointed look in Nam's son's eyes. "Do you know how worried your mother must be?" she asked, pouring him a cup of tea. "Running around the galaxy, invading planets, not calling home." The mighty warrior shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Our species doesn't have mothers like humans do," he tried to explain. Nam's son shook her head sadly. "That explains a lot. No wonder you're all so badly behaved." She sipped her tea and sighed. "Now about this invasion business." For the next hour, the most feared warrior in the Nexus Dominion sat and listened as Nam's son explained exactly how disappointed she was in their behavior. She used the same techniques that had kept peace at family gatherings for 50 years. Through the alien warrior's communication device, every member of the invasion force heard her words. They heard about responsibility, about respect for elders, about the importance of good manners. Each disappointed sigh and subtle guilt trip hit harder than any weapon. By the time Nam Sun finished speaking, the Supreme Combat Specialist looked thoroughly defeated. His shoulders slumped, and his fearsome armor somehow seemed less impressive. I think we should leave now," he said quietly. "That would be best," Nam Sun agreed. "And remember, I'm not angry, just disappointed." That phrase, perfected by generations of grandmothers, proved to be the final blow. Within hours, the entire invasion force began to withdraw from Earth. Commander Vex watched in disbelief as his ultimate warrior returned, looking completely demoralized. "What happened down there?" The Supreme Combat Specialist just shook his head. She said she was disappointed in us," he whispered, still haunted by Nam Sun's words. 1 week after the Nexus Dominion's retreat, Park Sunja hosted a victory celebration in her garden. The evening air was warm, and the sweet smell of her flowers mixed with the aroma of traditional dishes that covered the long tables. Grandparents from all across the city gathered in her backyard. Kim Young-ho and Lee Myre brought their special combat knitting supplies, now safely stored away as regular crafting tools. Kang Hee-soo displayed her kimchi jars, once again holding only delicious food rather than alien-disrupting compounds. "To think they never realized," Yoon Ta-won said, watching the children play nearby. "The strongest warriors on Earth were right in front of them the whole time." In space, the Nexus Dominion ships moved far away from Earth. Commander Vex prepared his final report for the High Council. His hand shook as he wrote, "Earth's elderly humans are not what they seem. Their gray hair hides wisdom. Their gentle smiles mask incredible strength. Their simple hobbies conceal deadly skills." Back in Sunja's garden, Han Jae-ho helped serve tea to the guests. He looked at the gathering with new eyes, seeing not just a group of grandparents, but Earth's most effective defense force. "Grandmother," he asked Sunja, "will the aliens ever come back?" Sunja smiled as she arranged cookies on a plate. "Perhaps. But now, they know better than to underestimate us." She gestured at the celebration around them. "Look at everyone here. What do you see?" Jae-ho looked carefully. He saw Nam Sun teaching young children the proper way to fold napkins, the same technique she had used to demoralize the alien Supreme Warrior. Choi Dae-sung showed teenagers how to fix electronic devices, his knowledge of alien technology hidden behind grandfatherly patience. "I see." Jae-ho paused, understanding growing in his eyes. "I see our family. All of them. And they're all so strong." "Exactly," Sunja said. "Our strength isn't in weapons or technology. It's in thousands of years of experience, passed down through generations. Every recipe, every story, every little lesson we teach, they all matter." As the sun set, the grandparents shared stories of the invasion. Each tale became part of their family histories, new secrets to be preserved in recipe books and photo albums for future generations. In the darkening sky, a shooting star streaked overhead. Everyone knew it was really a Nexus Dominion scout ship, keeping its distance. The aliens had learned their lesson. Earth had guardians more powerful than any advanced weapon. Grandparents who had spent lifetimes learning to protect their families. "Remember this day," Sunja told Jiho as they watched the false shooting star disappear. "Someday, you'll tell your grandchildren about it. And they'll understand why we keep our recipe books so carefully, why we practice our hobbies so diligently, and why a grandmother's disappointed sigh can be the strongest weapon of all."